So I want to get into a story here that kind of circles back. We were talking about the subway shooting and Eric Adams' policies, the NYPD's handling, the media's handling, etc. This is in Jacobin. It's by Ross Barkan, who I had the pleasure of interviewing maybe a year ago. He's a journalist that covers New York politics, and he has been all over Eric Adams' term as mayor. New York Mayor Eric Adams is a do-nothing mayor. New York Mayor Eric Adams, whose first 100 days in office just came to a close, has had few accomplishments to brag about, but his hidden source of political strength lies precisely in the fact that he never promised he'd do much in the first place. And I want to point out how this also sort of this same dynamic applies to Joe Biden, right? Where he's breaking a lot of promises on things like climate and student debt cancellation and things like that. He was kind of careful not to make any promises that were too strong. Like even his promises were kind of timid, compromise positions to start with. Tepidly progressive at best, right? So if you don't promise too much, then you can kind of be a do-nothing leader, and it tends to hurt you a little bit less. More than 100 days have passed since Eric Adams was sworn in as New York's 110th mayor. The milestone is arbitrary, dating back to Franklin D. Roosevelt, and there's little reason to believe grand conclusions can be drawn from a few months in power, but it's worth taking stock because politicians do make promises they try, in some cases, to keep. I love that sentence. For the ambitious, 100 days is enough to lay the groundwork for a greater agenda. Bill de Blasio, much maligned now, was already fighting to get funding for the universal pre-kindergarten expansion that would remake New York's social safety net. 100 days in, the former mayor had signed into law significant pieces of legislation like the mandating of paid sick days in the private sector. Adams, conversely, has pitched very little. He does get around plenty. He shows up at the scenes of street crimes and parties with celebrities like Cara Delevingne. He has been an unabashed booster for big business and promised to bring the city back from its COVID doldrums. Some of Adams' act can be helpful. The public expects the mayor to be a cheerleader and performer. It's fine to have swagger when leading the biggest city in America. Getting tourists back to Manhattan is integral to the city's economic future. So much of the Adams agenda, though, is lacking. There is no big ticket policy items or large safety net expansions. There are few tangible programs or projects for New Yorkers to grasp onto. Adams does not empower his agency heads to dream up proposals for the parks or streets that break credibly from the past. It has been, for all its noise, one of the least imaginative administrations in modern times. Rather than fight for new affordable housing and the return of single-room occupancy hotels to house the poorest, Adams has deputized police to kick the homeless off the subways. He is nowhere close to ending the problem. Rather, there has been much bellowing about lowering the crime rate and failure thus far to bring it down to pre-pandemic levels. Predictably, Adams has leaned into heavy-handed policing as the solution and threatened at various times to bring back some version of stop and frisk. Adams, a former police captain, is a booster of dangerous surveillance mechanisms like facial recognition technology. He has floated the implausible idea in the wake of a mass shooting at a subway station in Brooklyn of installing metal detectors in stations. So he obviously goes on to get into a whole number of other issues there, but I wanted to tie that into the story that we talked about earlier with the subway shooting, and how ineffective police are at actually dealing with it. Adams, of course, reneging on a number of promises here and actually going backwards as it pertains to how the homeless and the impoverished are treated in New York. We've all seen the videos, right? While police can't stop an active shooter or prevent an active shooter from engaging in violence, while police cannot solve violent crimes at any reasonable rate whatsoever, especially, by the way, crimes committed against women. Go look at how many rapes are actually solved by police. While they fail miserably at their job to prevent or solve violent crime, they are very good at harassing homeless people or waking people up on subways, right? Really good at that. Really good at harassing you on whether or not you paid your $2.75 to take the fucking subway, right? Real consequential shit. They're really getting at the core problems in society by harassing people over $3 fucking, aren't they? This is what police resources go to, you guys. And it's also worth pointing out that Alec talks about this all the time. Alec Karakatsanis, at Equality Alec on Twitter, go give him a follow. He talks about this all the time, that you'd be astounded how many resources police departments put towards their PR teams. In other words, people who are there to make the department look good, not make the department act good, right? So cover up for their crimes and their violence and their mishandling of situations, their brutality, their theft from the public, via asset forfeiture and all these kinds of things. Cover up for that. LAPD gangs, right? The Los Angeles Police Department pours millions and millions and millions of dollars into dozens of PR experts. So let's not address the problem. Let's just try to make it look like we don't have one. That is their strategy. And NYPD, of course, no different here. So shame on Eric Adams for such just worthless mayoral first 100 days. He also, I find it particularly disgusting how Eric Adams will, as a cop who supports stop and frisk, he will sit there and play the race card. And whenever he is attacked from the left, he basically accuses said person of racism. Ross Barkan has also actually spoken about this. He went on Breaking Points a month or two ago to talk about exactly that. Any negative piece written about, I'm sure Ross for this piece has probably been accused of racism. This is what Eric Adams falls back on. And I just find it particularly to minimize a very real thing. We do have a serious problem with racism in this country. To minimize and trivialize and weaponize such a real problem in such a disgusting way, when you're part of that problem, when you support stop and frisk, when you increase funds for police, when you instruct police to go out and harass people, disproportionately people of color, you have the gall to portray yourself as some sort of fucking social justice hero. It is nauseating. It is just deplorable and condemnable and morally repugnant, and people should not fall for it from anyone like Eric Adams. So great piece there from Ross Barkan and Jacobin, keeping track of Mayor Adams' lack of action there in New York in his first 100 days. Huge shout out to them.